Okay, so we are live on Instagram again for a special conversation on a book called Delhi in Their Name. So we are waiting for people to join in, and then we shall start. Okay, I can see Rupa now. Adrija, I've sent you a request. Okay, yeah, I've got the request. I'll accept it, and let's see what we can do.
Hello.
Can you see me? Adrija, can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can see you, and I'm really sorry about this technical glitch right in the beginning.
Not at all, but after so much struggle, we are here. Thank you so much for accepting
Yes.
this invitation to be here on Karwaan. It's such an honor to host you.
Thank you so much for it's really an honor to be here.
Thank you so much. Hello everyone. Welcome to Karwaan. This is Eshan Sharma, and for a change, we are not on YouTube, but we are on Instagram Live with one and only Adrija Roychowdhury, the author of a very popular book, I must say, Delhi in Thy Name. And when you read the name, one thing that comes in your mind is the Romeo Juliet popular line, "What is in the name?" But there's so much in the name that she explores in this book published by Rupa Publications. I'll read out a small introduction of the author. She's a journalist by profession and a historian by passion. We hardly see any passionate historian now, but fortunately, we have someone amongst us today. She was born in Calcutta in 1990, or Kolkata, if name matters, and completed her graduation from Lady Sri Ram College in Delhi. And after completing her master's from Delhi University and New York University, she has been writing for leading national dailies in India, including the Indian Express and Hindustan Times. And in her writing, she weaves contemporary socio-political events with deep historical narratives, archival research, and voices of people. And this book is her first book. But once you read it, you won't think that it is something that a debutee would write. So thank you so much, Adrija, for writing such a beautiful book, Delhi in Thy Name. And it has got compliments and appreciation from God knows how many historians. And you have mentioned quite a few in the book itself, including Shahid Amin, Amar Farooqi, Swapna Liddell, and the leading authority on Delhi, Narayani Gupta. And when I read your book, the first thing that I did was to go back to Narayani Gupta's article that she wrote for a book which was published by Mala Dayal called Delhi through its toponymy. I think that was the title of the chapter, where she talked about, for the first time, a historian talked about the history of names, especially the roads names. And you have taken that task forward by implementing that idea on the names of the neighborhoods that we see every day, but seldom we think about them. That what went behind naming those places, and you have chosen 6 places in your book, including the very popular, very much much for which much has been written, Chandni Chowk and Connaught Place. In your book. So my first question to you is, and also those who are joining us, they can send in their questions in the Q&A thing on your mobile screen. I don't know, I'm not that tech savvy, but whatever you call it, the Q&A section on the Instagram Live, send in your questions in the chat. We'll be figuring out and we'll be taking those questions towards the end. So how did you begin your research? I think 4 or 5 research, as you somewhere said. How did you start the idea of this book? How did it germinate?
So, Ishan, like the idea actually generated in the present political context, the whole idea of names changing almost every day. We see this happening, and this was when I signed up for this book. It was 2019 when 2018 or 19, and that time there were a spree of name changes were happening. Where the Aurangzeb Road changing into Abdul Kalam on the name of President Abdul Kalam. Then there was Allahabad. There was, of course, the Mughal Sarai station. There were many names that were being changed, and the whole idea was to look at, why is a name so potent? What is it behind a name? If a party in power has to give out a political message, there are so many other things it can do. Then why is it that a name is so potent? What is it about it? So that was the whole idea, was to look at the politics of naming. Now, in what we wanted to do, both Rupa and I, my editor and Rupa and I, we thought about this, that the best way to do this would be to look at the stories and the little, the little stories that goes behind naming streets in one city. And we chose Delhi, of course, because it is the capital of India, and a lot of what you see, the way names of streets occur in Delhi, it tells you a story about the history of India itself. Because it's a capital, but I won't ever say that Delhi represents all of India. No, that's not the case. But in this case, it chose Delhi also because I personally connect with Delhi very well. I have been here for close to more than a decade now, and I understand the city very closely. It's very close to my heart. So it was, it was something. There were two things over here. One is to look at the history of Delhi. The other thing is to look at politics of naming, which we thought we'll bring it together in this book. That's how we started. And then, of course, there are many other strains of thoughts over here. Of course, I have focused not just on the much spoken about Chandni Chowk and Connaught Place and the British and Mughal era of Delhi, which is very, it's spoken about a lot more. My idea was also to look more into post-independent Delhi, which is not as well researched, I feel, as much as it should be. And it's, post 1947, you see large parts of Delhi today is actually what it became post 1947. Once the partition happened, once people from across the country start coming in, it's the capital of an independent India. So how the capital of independent India takes shape is post 1947. And this is a period of Delhi's history that I thought hasn't been looked at more closely. And street names are a fantastic way of doing so. Because it's not just the name, it's also the many stories and aspirations that have gone behind it. Eshan, are you there?
Yes, I'm. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You mentioned about the post-independent thing, and I'll come to that question later, where we'll talk about how partition impacted the whole, demography of the city, where you have different communities claiming their spaces in the city, coming up of different neighborhoods that we'll discuss. But the politics of name changing, you start with the introduction, and where you mentioned two case studies, one being Faizabad, which is now Ayodhya, which also relates to Delhi in some senses with the second last chapter that you write on Saket, that we'll talk about. And you also talk about Prayagraj, which was Allahabad. But an interesting part of the book is when you write about the Pamposh enclave. All the neighborhoods that you have mentioned, most of them take names from some political, background, including the Connaught Place or the Shahjahanabad, as it was known. Chittaranjan Park was named after Chittaranjan Das, and also other places that you mentioned. But how do you think Pamposh enclave is a strange paradox in that sense, because it doesn't take any political connotations to it?
Eshan, actually the Pamposh enclave chapter was one of the most challenging ones, because anything to do with Kashmir has to be, looked at very carefully. It is something very, very difficult for a non-Kashmiri to understand. And I mean, it's extremely challenging for somebody who's not from Kashmir to understand this. Now, when I started with the Pamposh Enclave chapter, my idea was to look at, maybe it's just nostalgia, a group of people who have, moved out of Kashmir, and they probably look back at the landscape of their homes, and what they want, what they look forward to, what they are thinking about their homes. That is how I had approached it. But the more I spoke to the people in Pamposh Enclave, and I also spoke to Rahul Pandita, whom I have interviewed for the chapter, more I realized that you cannot also call Pamposh apolitical. It is making a political point, but in a different way, without naming its political, without naming people from Kashmir. Why even when we Pamposh in Kashmiri means lotus. What I understood, my analysis of the naming of Pamposh Enclave is to look at how the people of Kashmir also want to remember only the landscape of Kashmir, the geography, the memory of Kashmir, rather than the history of Kashmir. There's so much of bitterness, so much of grievances, that you rather remember what you have left behind rather than the political processes that led to you leaving, or the historical processes that were going on. So you rather remember the little motifs that you have left behind over there. So even if of course Pamposh Enclave is the name of one neighborhood, but if you see one of the most popular Kashmiri community centers and a restaurant inside Pamposh Enclave, it's called Samawar, which is basically the utensil in which the kahwa is prepared. Or you will see a lot of places being named after Chinar, after these kind of things. The motifs from Kashmir, they hold more value to the Kashmiri diaspora, and I would say both the Muslim and the Pandit diaspora, they carry the motifs of Kashmir very close to their heart. Rather than looking at, while the Bengali community which lives right opposite Pamposh Enclave is named after Chittaranjan Das, who was a nationalist leader, and it is very interesting as to why the Kashmiri Pandit neighborhood chose not to name their neighborhood after any particular leader or any historical episode as such, and rather chose to name it after a motive from Kashmir. That is something that struck me as quite interesting. And another thing to remember is that this particular neighborhood, it was developed in the 1960s. It's not in the 1990s, which means that this is not the time in which the whole exodus of Pandits happened. That is not when this neighborhood came up. It came up much before that. And again, like when I started interviewing my my respondents, and I went back to the to the many books on Kashmiri Pandit exodus, I realized that migration has also become a part of Kashmiri identity. And again, when migration becomes part of your identity, what do you carry with you when you leave your home? You carry little memories of of the little things you have seen in your home, of the experiences of your home. This is what you carry with you. And unlike the migration of partition, or unlike the migration of, say, people who moved all of a sudden from one place to another, the Pandit exodus is almost something that has been happening in waves through years, and this is part of their identity. So, remembering their home is also part of who they are. So that's how I look at it, and I don't think Pamposh is apolitical. It is making a political point, but in a different way.
And the point of migration, I think half of Delhi consists of the migrants from various parts of the nation, and even what is now Pakistan and Bangladesh. So how do you think migration has shaped this city, especially after the 70s, after the Bangladesh war?
See, I don't think, we can just look at the 70s Bangladesh war, because migration has been shaping Delhi from 1947 or even before that. This is a city built by outsiders, largely outsiders, and you see large parts of Delhi, if apart from uh, old Delhi side, everything else is what is built after 1947. Slowly you build a city, and you bring a lot of these villages that were most parts of Delhi today. What is Greater Kailash? What is CR Park? What is Compost and Place? These were largely village land, which were brought and made spaces made available to the migrants. So I don't think we can just look at the Bangladesh war. I know why a lot of people mistake that is for the CR Park neighborhood as well. And I want to clarify that, if, first of all, the way Chittaranjan Park comes into being, it has nothing to do with the Bangladesh war. It is, yes, it was formed and it was established in 71, but the process of forming CR Park started out much before, from sometime in late 50s or even mid 50s, I would say. What happened at that time was that large parts of Delhi, these plots of land were being given out for settling the refugees. So you have Kalkaji, which is right next to CR Park, and you have GK2 and GK1 coming up. And so at that point, there were a number of Bengali civil servants, Bengalis working in government jobs over here. And these were typically not refugees, these were people who were already living in Delhi. Some of them were refugees in the sense that they probably came from what was East Pakistan in 47, moved to, say, Bengal. Their families then sent their children to Delhi to aspire for as UPSC aspirants or, as central government employees. That's how they moved to Delhi, and they were already in Delhi, most of them. So when the East Pakistan, the EPDP, what is called, East Pakistan Development, I am forgetting the last name, this particular association is formed. The idea was to request the government that, okay, since you are settling refugees from Punjab, then there are so many of us who have who have lost out on property in East Bengal. So give us some land so that we can build houses over here and settle down here. So, and these are not refugees, okay? These are people who have basically just lost property in East Bengal. And also, another important point to remember over here, these were also not just people who had moved out of East Bengal after 47. There's a long history of Bengalis in Delhi, right from the 17th and 18th century onwards. Many of them were here. They probably had ancestors back in East Bengal. They had some property there. You just had to show that you have lost out on property in East Bengal. That's the only proof required to build a house in CR Park. And that's how CR Park is built. And once the central government employees approach the government, a large number of private employees also said that no, a lot of, why only government employees, even private employees should get plots of land over here. So and again, the idea was not Bengali, the idea was to only give plots of land to people who had lost out on property in East Bengal. These were not just Bengalis. If you see the original land records, there are people who are non-Bengalis also who got plots of land in CR Park. But somehow, by virtue of the fact that there was a large number of Bengalis who had lost out on land and property in East Bengal, CR Park eventually became a fairly Bengali neighborhood. But this is not something that was completely planned as a Bengali neighborhood. It was planned as giving space to people who had lost out on property in East Bengal. And then of course you have of course today every Bengali who migrates to Delhi, the first stop is CR Park for its fish and the Bengali food that we get here.
Definitely, and that was why the question was framed such way. And thank you so much for clarifying that misconception that all a majority of people have about CR Park, that was made for the Bengalis, and that's the place where Durga Puja happens every year. You also interviewed the first resident of CR Park, if I'm not wrong, in the book. So
Yes,
what was
yes.
the insight like? How was the experience of interviewing him?
Oh, so this is Mr. Paritosh Bandyopadhyay, and you know, Paritosh uncle, he loves talking. Okay, he lives by himself. He does everything by himself, and he loves talking. And he was a journalist himself in the past, so he had lovely stories to share. And it's not just about, like, I think Paritosh uncle did a lot of my work easy by virtue of the fact that he was such an eloquent speaker that a lot of my writing was, while I was writing about him, because he had spoken so beautifully, they just became a lot easier for me to write. He when he narrated about his father leaving East Bengal, it was a beautiful image he built. How his father, he got up on the steamer and it was leaving, and he had tears in his eyes, and he was saying bye to the land in which he had been teaching and working for all these years. And he then his last comment was, Gandhiji, you have lost the war, and he says it in Bangla and in beautiful Bengali. And he, like, interviewing him was a beautiful experience, because he had not just, like, the most very intricate details about how CR Park was being formed, but also very eloquent in and since he loved speaking, he also had, very grand details about what was happening, and also the emotions that was going on in the Bengalis of the time. When you come to CR, at that moment, when CR Park was being built, he told me that, he would take the bus and come here when the first building blocks were being placed, and he would see the place and feel, oh, this is going to be my colony, this is Bengali colony, is going to be for my people. And for for a migrant community, this idea of finding something that is going to be my own, it's going to be owned by the community, it's very evocative. It's something very special. It also means that somewhere the community has also been able to find success in a new city. So that's a very, it's a very special moment for any migrant community in a new city, when a new place is being built, which is typically, it has been kept aside only for you. It's very special. It's of huge significance for that community. I'm pretty sure, when Indians move to Canada and the US, and they find, and these localities are built only for Indians, these Indian streets, and mini India and things like that, they also are significant. They are also symbols of how the community has been successful in a new place. And that comes out very strongly in the way Paritosh uncle, speaks about his first few days in CR Park, when he used to come here and everybody used to recognize this colony as the Bengali neighborhood. So that is something that I found very sweet. It was really remarkable interviewing him. I had long conversations, and he had so much to say about the early days of CR Park.
Talking about CR Park, there's this neighborhood just adjacent to CR Park Market, which was known as the Masjid Mode. But later the name was changed to Greater Kailash 3.
Yes.
And there was a whole politics of renaming Masjid Mode to Greater Kailash, because I think the association the society association said that, who has a name called Masjid Mode, let's make it Greater Kailash 3. And I think Narayani Gupta is a resident of Greater Kailash 3, and I was having a conversation with her, and when she opposed the renaming of the whole. So how do you see that happening in various parts of the city?
If you look at Saket, it's somewhat similar as well. Look at Dwarka, these typically, places like Greater Kailash, Dwarka, Saket, a lot of them named after Hindu mythologies or characters of Hindu mythology, and it will strike you something that, this is happening in a post-independent India, in a modern India, which we pride as being secular. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with having places named after mythology, but like you're saying, Masjid Mode is renamed as Greater Kailash. If you look at the way Saket is renamed, that entire area has a large number of tombs, mosques, a fairly large Muslim population. But why it gets named after Ayodhya, which is Saket is another name of Ayodhya. It's also speaks about majoritarianism, which is fairly subconscious. Not everything is about हमें राम मंदिर चाहिए. It's also about how we look, how we subconsciously are majoritarian in our sensibilities. So how it would be like recently. I think the DDA has also while it is about to come up with its new flats, and it has asked people to suggest names for the new neighborhood, and it would be interesting to see how if at all maybe an Urdu name is taken up as the name of the neighborhood. That hardly ever happens, but so what does that tell us about our majoritarian sensibilities? There is, and the whole naming of Saket, there is no process to it as such. It's not as if the DDA sat down and said that, nahi, we will name this area after a Hindu mythological figure or, some motive from Ramayan. That is not how it happens. It happens in the most casual way. Because in the most casual way, when we look at, when we think about spaces around us, we probably don't even think that we are thinking like a Hindu or we are thinking like a Muslim for that matter. These things don't occur to us immediately. But again, when these name changes happen, it's only when, say, a historian or a political scientist points out, that this is, okay, why is Masjid More renamed as Greater Kailash? What is the message that the government is trying to give over here? It's only then that it occurs to us. But actually, there is something to be said about, how casually majoritarian we are. We don't think much about it. We probably, a lot of us would, even the ones who probably named these areas never really thought of it in a very conscious way that we want to rename, we want to probably, remove the name Masjid Maut and rename it as after on Mount Kailash. Nobody does it consciously, perhaps. We don't know. I haven't really looked at the Greater Kailash area that closely. In case of Saket, I can say that to you. It wasn't a conscious decision, but it is very casual. It's very subconscious. That's how I look at it.
A conscious decision was renaming Aurangzeb Road as after a good Muslim, quote unquote good Muslim, Abdul Kalam. Mm-hmm. And there was a whole series of renaming of roads, but they forgot to rename other Mughal emperors in that. Yes. And I think there is Aurangzeb Lane around Prithviraj Road. Yeah. There's a small alleyway. Yes.
And I'll tell you an interesting thing. Like, it's funny that when Aurangzeb Road was renamed, the idea was कि हमें Mughals की history मिटानी है. Okay, we want to remove the history of Mughals. But it is not the Mughals who named that road as Aurangzeb Road. Okay, it is actually the British who had named it as Aurangzeb Road, and there was a purpose for that as well. When you're renaming, you are also removing a source of history. Because why did the British look at it very, carefully? You see Prithviraj Road, Ashoka Road, there is Aurangzeb Road, Akbar Road. It's all in the same area, right? Why does that happen? What was the message that the British were trying to give when they were building New Delhi? They were trying to say that, here are all the Indian emperors and we are part of them. We are part of that lineage. So when the British built New Delhi and they built all these names, they were the ones who gave these names, and the idea was that, we are in this line of great Indian emperors, we are one among them. So it is not the Mughals who have named Aurangzeb Road as Aurangzeb Road, it is the British. But when the renaming happened, the idea was, Mughals, we don't want a bad Mughal name over here, but, that was, Aurangzeb hardly had a role to play in naming that road.
Definitely. And I think it was the task of Percival Spear, who was the history teacher at St. Stephen's College, who was first given the task of, naming the roads in Delhi when the city was developed in the 20s and 30s, and when the capital was shifted to Delhi. Another question that I would like to ask you is about the much talked about Shahjahanabad, Chandni Chowk. The name
Hmm.
Chandni Chowk, how it came up, because earlier it was not called as Chandni Chowk during Shahjahan's time. It is a recent
Hmm. Hmm.
thing. And also, how was your experience going through the lanes? Because uh, it's very popular in Shahjahanabad. There is no name for the lane. It's either Satte Wali Gali, it's either Lattu Shah ki Gali that you mentioned in the book itself.
Hmm.
It's either People Ke Ped
Hmm.
Wali Gali or something like that. So how difficult it was
Hmm.
navigating through those streets.
Uh, I'll first answer the second question of yours. Uh, as a student in Delhi, or when my early years as a professional over here as well, one often looks at Old Delhi, and especially if you've lived in South Delhi, you often look at Old Delhi and go, "Oh my God, it's so, it's so confusing and chaotic." Like you're saying, it's like it's yeah. How did you navigate around? But for during the research, I of course went back over and again, and I realized that there is this entire idea of a chaotic Old Delhi is all in our heads. It's navigating is not that difficult, and this these little names that you have across the streets in Old Delhi, that is what makes it extremely special. If you see Lattu Shah ki Gali and the Sui Wala and Chui Wala, these are names you will not come across anywhere else. They are typically Old Delhi, and it has beautifully retained these the old Delhi has beautifully retained these names despite centuries of upheaval and changes and whatnot. These little names of neighborhoods that came up either after the community that lived there, or a particular profession of like people who selling this sui needles became sui wala, or bangles, churi wala. Like these are, it's very unique to the fabric of Old Delhi, and it's not like navigating it was perhaps the best experience of writing my book, because it was almost I wanted to take the reader through the lanes on a journey through Old Delhi, and that is something that I had on my mind, that it's when I'm writing about the names, it's also about how the what these places look like today. In Suiwala, you don't come across any person selling needles anymore. It's all a lot of meat shops, But it's interesting, how these names came about and have been retained through centuries. It's if you look at the character of Old Delhi, so much has changed, but these names have been there, So that is one thing that I don't think I won't use the word navigate over here. I'll just say that I was taking a stroll through Old Delhi, and it was a beautiful experience. Well, one of the best experiences of researching for my book. About how Chandni Chowk. Now, it's not like Chandni Chowk wasn't there. Chandni Chowk was there. It was just a chalk, a fountain, on the what is today the Chandni Chowk Road. There was a little, one square that was named as Chandni Chowk by Jahanara Begum, who was the daughter of Shah Jahan, and she is the one who commissioned that chalk. And she wanted this very glamorous marketplace to come about around it, and you had traders from across the world coming here to sell their artifacts. And so this little chalk was what was called Chandni Chowk. It's over the years with the British, and of course post-partition, that the entire road, and in some ways for an outsider, all of Old Delhi is somehow known as Chandni Chowk. So I had, in fact, apart from interviewing residents who hold Old Delhi very close to their heart, if you've seen Mr. Ashok Mathur was interviewed, and he still prefers calling Old Delhi as Sheher. It's his city. They of course wouldn't agree with me that that entire area is called Chandni Chowk, but Google Maps does refer to this area as Chandni Chowk, and a lot of Delhiites or non-Delhiites would consider Old Delhi as Chandni Chowk. When my analysis of this would be, and when I spoke to Miss Swapna Little, Dr. Swapna Little as well, even, that's how we analyze this, is that, if in post-partitioned Delhi, when you have a lot of Punjabi migrants coming in, they would rather refer to this area as Chandni Chowk and not Shahjahanabad. One, because Chandni Chowk gives you the impression of this, reminds you of entrepreneurship, of business, of prosperity, because of how this market was, perceived in the Mughal era and, ever since then. And another thing is, you rather not remember the Mughal past of Delhi, especially in, when we are looking at posts in the years right after 1947. Shahjahanabad would remind you of Mughal Delhi, and a past that partition migrants partition refugees did not want to remember, recollect so much, given the kind of religious violence they had gone through at that point. So Chandni Chowk became, an easier way to connect with this new place they had come to. They rather name this Chandni Chowk rather than referring to it as on Shah Jahan's name. That's how I look at this. Otherwise, I don't see why all of Old Delhi needs to be seen as Chandni Chowk.
And that's an interesting insight and a different kind of interpretation of Shahjahanabad that we have read in various books. So that's a unique USP of the book if people wish to read it, and we really recommend it that you read it. So we are getting some messages and chats in the live chat. So I would recommend those. I would request those people to send the questions in the question thing on the live. I don't know what you call it, the question section in the live, so that we will be able to read that more easily, because reading chat here is very difficult for us. It's better that you send us the questions in the question part of this. You can see that icon of question. That you just click on that icon and send in your question, so that will be easy for us to take the questions later. So I'll come to the next question. The most interesting part of the book that for me was, there are many interesting parts, and I think I'm calling everything the most interesting part. Another interesting part of the book was the interview with Manishankar Iyer, and the person who called the outer circle as Indira circle, the mother, and the inner circle as Rajiv circle, the child. How was it, and how did you decide to interview Manishankar Iyer for this particular chapter? Because it's very controversial. The whole renaming of Connaught Place was a controversial thing when it was done. So how do you come across that?
So, the whole idea was, since he was the one to proposition Rajiv Chowk, it was the best way to, understand what was in his mind when he propositioned Rajiv Chowk, and how does he look at the fact that, nobody calls Connaught Place as Rajiv Chowk. Connaught Place is CP or Connaught Place to us, So, I wanted to, who best can tell us about what went in his mind while he proposed Rajiv Chowk other than Manishankar Iyer himself. So I reached out to him, and he was fairly gracious to, speak with me. And I must say that I was very nervous when I approached him, because he's kind of known for his controversial statements. So I was very nervous, but then he was very, very warm, extremely warm, and I must say that he's extremely eloquent. Like the whole reason why this particular part of the book I had kept in the Q&A form. If you notice, with everything else I have sort of woven in through my writing, but the interview with Manishankar Iyer, I wanted it to be in the Q&A form for a very simple reason, that I don't think I will be able to do justice as a writer to weave in his thoughts into my writing. He is an extremely well-spoken man, and he gave me very honest insights on what he thought about why he wanted the name Rajiv Chowk over here. He was a close friend of Rajiv Gandhi. It was an emotional moment back in the early 1990s when Mr. Rajiv Gandhi passed away, and he wanted the place to be wanted Connaught Place to be renamed. And his idea also was that when everything else that was named after the British has been clearly renamed, and there are so many examples we have of names on British officials which has been renamed in Delhi, but then why is it that Connaught Place has been kept as it is, when the Duke of Connaught hardly had anything to do with India, for that matter. He came to India, I think, twice or thrice for very specific occasions. Most of the times he was actually replacing one of the other members of the royal family. So he clearly had no role to play over here. But we still hold his name very dear. And he wanted it to be renamed as Rajiv Chowk and the outer circle as Indira Chowk. So the appearance was of the mother hugging the child. But, I think what my takeaway also was that if people hold a name dear, you don't need to have any rationalization about whether they know the Duke of Connaught or have any kind of connection with him or connect with him in any way. Connaught Place is a brand, and the shopkeepers and people in it, they look at Connaught Place in a certain way. So I remember, walking into one of I think the India Arts Palace shop in CP, and I had asked the owner, why, do you think that why didn't you all want Rajiv Chowk over here? Why Connaught Place? And he had given me a very nice answer that, this is a very modern, posh shopping complex, and Chowk does not do justification to what Connaught Place is. Then the owner of the toy shop that I have whom I have interviewed in the book, he had told me that, it's a signifier of the aspirations of the people who were the first shopkeepers in Connaught Place. They wanted this to be an elite market, and Rajiv Chowk wasn't doing justice. And when I interviewed Mr. Manishankar Iyer for this, and he was very honest in saying that the whole reason why people did not accept Rajiv Chowk was also the timing. If you look at maybe in the early 1990s, there were so many things happening at that time, and the Congress party was not exactly looked at very favorably, and his proposition to name this place as Rajiv Chowk was clearly seen as an act of sycophancy, which people weren't willing to accept. But then again, he's also fairly happy about the fact that, if you see the only place that is, like, the metro station did take the name Rajiv Chowk, which is the busiest metro station in Delhi now, and so everybody going, anywhere in most parts of Delhi will cross Rajiv Chowk at some point, and he says that, that made my life, whatever I wanted to do, I have achieved that. So yeah, he was fairly, honest about what the situation of the Congress party was at that time. People didn't look at it favorably. There were a lot of things happening at that time. The Babri Masjid case happened, the Shabano case happened, and there were so many things. My understanding is that many things that we see happening in India today, it started out early in the 1990s, and that was not the perfect time to proposition a name after Mr. Rajiv Gandhi. People did not want it, and that is where I do feel that people's voices. It's not just about the people in power who name a place. It's also about how whether people accept the name change or not.
Definitely, and that's an important point, and that made this chapter very special about the contemporary issues in renaming. Another chapter, the last chapter, we'll come to the last chapter later, but because you mentioned interviews, I think what I found in most chapters are those personal interviews are there in every. Those conversations are there in every chapter. Like in Shaheen Bagh, you have the one who settled Shaheen Bagh. In Chittaranjan Park, you have the earliest resident of Chittaranjan Park. In Chandni Chowk, you have Mathur Saab in the book. So, was it intentional to add these subaltern kind of perspectives to the history of names?
I like the fact it's interesting that you use the word subaltern. I don't know if all my interviewees will be happy to be associated with the word subaltern. But no, see, the idea was that, we cannot, I don't think that we can understand the naming or the politics of naming, without keeping people in mind. You have to understand, a name is not just something that, somebody in power chooses. It's also about how whether people, are willing to embrace it. So what CR Park, for instance, is still known as Bengali colony, right? And that is how people have also, they want to look at it that way. So you have to keep people as part of any book that, on names. In my understanding, at least when I approach this, one was that, I cannot keep people out when it comes to writing about names. One is this. Secondly, I think I also wanted the book to be journalistic in its sensibilities and not just historical. So people's voices is something that was very crucial to make this a book of journalism as well. It's not just something that is written from a historical perspective, but also from a journalistic perspective. So, and you can't do that without having people over here. I have to look at, if I just look at why Shaheen Bagh was named as Shaheen Bagh, it will be 2 lines. But I have to get people to speak about what went, why, what was the emotion behind Shaheen Bagh, and what is the emotion behind the dadis and everyone else who has been sitting in Shaheen Bagh. How do they look at the name Shaheen Bagh today, which is so popular and so much, it has become almost synonymous with revolution, especially Muslim revolution. It's a very poignant moment in our in contemporary India when Shaheen Bagh happens. So you can't leave that out when you're looking at the naming of Shaheen Bagh. And how can you do that without speaking to the people who make Shaheen Bagh?
And how do you think, out of all the neighborhoods, all the Muslim neighborhoods in Delhi, Shaheen Bagh in particular became that kind of, if you can say that's not a good term, but the poster boy of political Muslims in Delhi?
Okay. So, if you look at if you look at Shaheen Bagh, it like you said, why does it become the Muslim Muslims in Delhi? And in some ways, I would say, why was Shaheen Bagh the place where the anti-CA NRC protest started in India? Everywhere else, it was inspired by Shaheen Bagh. Even when you had in Calcutta and Lucknow, when it started out, it was inspired by Shaheen Bagh. And I do feel that this particular part of Delhi has something to do with the way Jamia also came up over here, and the Muslim population in this part of the city, in my opinion, is somewhere more politically conscious. Maybe because it is also it is next to a university. Any place that is next to a university will have some amount of a little larger amount of political consciousness because of the kind of activities that happen in any university. And I'm sure in the area, maybe because JNU is also it's one university and everything is inside it, but Jamia has something very special to it. In the one with the way the university also came up, it was also a product of nationalism when Jamia came up. By why it was built in the early 20th century. And then, if you look at it today, I don't think that the protests in Shaheen Bagh would have happened had the incident in Jamia not happened. Students of Jamia not started protesting. So there is it's kind of the, Eshan, I'm also running out of battery. I'm really sorry. I didn't see this coming. So can I just plug in my phone?
Yeah, sure. You can do that. Yeah.
Okay. Give me a moment.
Yeah, and so those are with us right now. Yeah. So people who have joined us, thanks so much. There is some echo, Adrija.
I'm so sorry.
No problem at all. I think there was some echo, but yeah, there's some echo right now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but I am hearing my voice twice. I think it's better now. It's better now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
There is some echo. Can you try joining again? Can you just exit and join again?
Hello.
Yeah.
Okay, is it better now?
No, there is some echo. So I think I would say that you exit and join again.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll just invite Adrija again.
Yes.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Now it's better. Yeah, the problem is resolved. So we were talking about Shaheen Bagh,
Okay,
and
okay.
you were saying that neighborhoods around universities are also have that sense of revolutionary kind of vibes. Uh, so yeah.
So my idea was also to look at, is there, can we say that the neighborhood of Shaheen Bagh is different from other Muslim-dominated neighborhoods in Delhi, like say a Nizamuddin or, parts of Old Delhi as well. And I do, in my opinion, in my research, I do find that there is some difference over here. So when I interviewed Niyaz Faruqi, who is also a journalist himself, and he has written this wonderful book on how what it means to be a Muslim in India, and he had told my first question to him was that when he came to Delhi, he belonged to a small village in Bihar. Why did he choose to be in this part of the city and not in say any of the other parts like a GK or a or a Saket and there are large Kalkaji and places like that. So his first response was that for any Muslim coming from Bihar, UP, especially post 2002, even before that, the first thing that strikes them is safety. Okay, and where can you find safety where will you, and it's not just about physical safety, it's also about mental safety, to know that you will not be thrown out by your landlord, that your neighbors will not be able by your presence. That is also a different kind of safety that you're looking out for. So that is the first thing that strikes them. Another thing is that there is a sort of a class distinction over here as well. So maybe if you are somebody who comes to Delhi as a factory worker, you would probably go to Jafrabad and Silampur and areas like that. But for somebody like Niyaz who is working as a journalist today, or anybody, you see people in this area around Jamia Nagar, you have a lot of young boys and girls working in corporates like Google, Facebook, just as interested in their professional growth as anyone else, and these are people who would choose to be around Jamia Nagar. And again, interestingly, they choose to live in these areas despite the fact that large parts of these areas are still unorganized. You don't have parks, you don't have a lot of these infrastructural facilities that you would find in other parts of Delhi. So you're still choosing that because, one, for safety, two, also because it's closer to a university, which makes it easier for you to to accomplish your professional aspirations as well. And this is how this entire area comes into being. And overall, if you see the fabric of this part of Delhi, this particular Muslim area of Delhi is very, very different from Old Delhi and Jafrabad, Silampur. You can call it in terms of in terms of class, in terms of intellectual curiosity. And again, how Niyaz puts it, like any revolution across the world, it has been led by the intellectual elite. So, why wouldn't a Shaheen Bagh come out over, in a place like this and not in any other part of Delhi? It's quite clear why that would happen, because, and of course, the Shaheen Bagh, the anti-CA protest is perhaps the first biggest protest led only by the Muslims in post-independent India, and it's it's not surprising why it would come up in an area around Jamia Nagar.
Yes, and that's quite fascinating itself. My next question to you is, what, being a journalist, what was the most challenging part of researching and going into these areas and interviewing them, and also how was your experience with the authorities? You might have had to go to the DDA office, getting the records and everything. How was that whole experience?
The experience of talking to the residents was wonderful. I don't think I've had a bad experience or anything that I can call challenging for that matter. It was wonderful. Each and every one I spoke to, many of whom are fairly aged residents of Delhi, and who had to sit down for hours speaking with me, answering my endless questions, and they were extremely cordial, warm, welcoming. Authorities not so much. The DDA is not very easy to track down. Even as a journalist reporting from Delhi, I've faced this. The DDA is not very warm to you, and they would want to give out information. And I know that the Saket chapter was one of the most challenging parts of that chapter, was to basically to pinning down why Saket, because nobody was willing to speak to me. Everyone I would call, they would say that first of all, this bizarre idea, who is looking for why Saket was named, so this bizarre question after years, decades, who is this woman who has called up to ask about why Saket was named? So it is probably lying somewhere deep in dusty files. So they were completely uninterested, and it's only when somebody I happened to come across who very casually, and also he was very clear that I cannot name him, because the DD officials are very, very particular about this, that you can't name them and while you're writing about them. And he told me that the entire process, how the process happens of naming a DDA neighborhood, but in close confidentiality, even though there's nothing much to to disclose, but somehow the authorities in the DDA are very, 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 they don't want to speak to you at all. They just don't want to. Again, the whole idea about it's quite ironical that the DDA represents inclusive housing, but they don't want to speak to people. It's quite interesting to look at it that way.
No, it's good that you found somebody. Otherwise, that would be an impossible task.
Yes.
So in this conversation, we talked about mostly I think all of the locations and neighborhoods that you mentioned in the book. So can we expect another part of this book where you will talk about, say, Pitampura and Shahadra, for instance?
No, I did. When I started out, I had 10 chapters in mind, to be very honest. But each of the chapters, I did not expect that each of them will take that long. They were taking a very long time, talking to people, pinning down exactly when it was named, why it was named, so how people relate to it today, contemporary events surrounding the names of these places. So I did not expect each of them will take so long, but definitely if there is a second edition, I will request Rupa to include more chapters with fresh historical and political insight in it, and I'm hoping to have more of East Delhi and West Delhi in it for sure.
Yeah, because the place where I lived in Delhi for 3 years, in Rohini, was a society where the Sikh people lived after the riots, the Sikh riots of '84. So it was a kind of refugees from Punjab who settled in Delhi, and also from different parts. And even the Trinagar area was settled after that, the Sikh riots. So it would be it would be great to read about that, and we look forward to a lot more in the second edition of the book. And as you said, it is a rather strange combination of history and journalism in this book, because it's very difficult for a journalist to take the historian's eye, and it's very difficult for a historian to take a journalistic viewpoint. So it's an intermingling of both the words in this book. If I can see the cover of this book and to people, and I got this book from a great friend of mine, Abhinav of Fakir Chand Bookstores. So he recommended this book to me before Rupa came to us. But we really recommend you all to get this book from bookstores, and if you are unable to visit a bookstore, because I can vouch this book is available in almost every bookstore in Kanpur and Lucknow, the city where I am right now. So you can get these from there, and in Delhi, I've seen this book at every bookstore. So it's a must read that you must get from wherever you can, from Amazon, from Flipkart, or wherever, online or offline markets, because it's interesting to know the stories behind names, and not just neighborhoods but also the roads, and how important these names are for people and for the politicians. And also another facet that I would like to see in the second edition is how a particular name can mean to different parts of the city. Like we have Panchsheel in Outer Ring Road, the Panchsheel Road, and we also have a Panchsheel Road in Shahadra, which is the not so developed part of the city, and how both the names are similar, but they have total different. One is very posh and one is kind of underdeveloped at the moment. So we would love to see that facet too in the book.
And that's an interesting, Eshan, that you mentioned that. Yes, it's something I will keep in mind in my next edition, if at all there's one.
Definitely. And there are some questions that we'll just look. There's somebody who is asking if these books available on Amazon Kindle. Yes, these are available in Kindle, so you can definitely go and read these books. This book, obviously, and if you want to read more on Delhi, you can check the Mala Dayal's edited Celebrating Delhi, I think was the title of that book that I mentioned in the beginning. Mighty Modi, one-line answer to why should I read this book after reading William Dalrymple's City of Jinns. I don't think you can compare these books. These are standalone books that you must read just for the sake of knowledge. You can't just compare historians, and you can't just compare books. So I'm really sorry, Mighty Modi. Would you like to answer that, Adrija?
I think The City of Jinns is my favorite book on Delhi, apart from Delhi by Khushwant Singh. Both these books are magnificent. I think I fell in love with Delhi after reading Delhi by Khushwant Singh, actually. And that's when I started exploring the city. I was a young student in Delhi University at that time, and I think I absolutely fell in love with Delhi after reading Delhi by Khushwant Singh and City of Jinns, of course. But to answer her question, I don't know what the best answer to that would be, but I think the best way to look at it is that City of Jinns was perhaps written 20 years back, and a city changes and evolves remarkably in 2 decades, and every book on Delhi that comes, not just mine, but in the next few years, everything else will bring a fresh insight, that keeps the last 20 years in mind as well.
That's a very important point, that a city changes. And, I would say a city changes every 5 years when there's a new political regime in power.
Absolutely. Every year as well, I would say, it's not just the central government, it's also the little, the politics inside, and so much changes every year. The Shaheen Bagh, for instance, wouldn't be a part of my chapter had 2019 not happened, So every year, I think in 20 years, you have an entire, a large amount of matter opening up right in front of you.
Yeah, it's like a whole new city coming up and struggling to get its identity from the older part. And that's quite visible in the book itself. There's another question. Is this book related to history? Obviously, it's related to history of Delhi. Good question. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, there are other books also that you can read if you want to. Uh, Carrie Louis asks, literature and politics can't be divorced. What do you feel? Sorry, I think we don't get that question if you want to elaborate on that. And she already talked about the process of research on the book. So, uh, okay, Ashok Saab is here. Hello, Mathur Saab.
Hello,
His,
sir.
his question is why did you choose to fall in love with Delhi than Calcutta?
one is Janam Bhumi, other is Karam Bhumi. You know this, and Karam Bhumi is any day more important than Janam Bhumi. And that's how I would put it. But I came to Delhi when I was, I think, 17 or 18, and ever since I've been here. And my earlier part of my childhood and adolescence, I've moved around in various cities because my father moved around quite a bit, and we moved around with them. And Delhi, in that sense, since I've spent like close to more than 10 years over here, it gave me an identity which of my own. It made me feel rooted. One, from a very personal level, if I have to say why I am in love with Delhi. But also for a 17, 18-year-old me, I saw Delhi from very curious eyes. I was a history student over here, and a lot of my friends and I would travel around the city, and there is something very unique to Delhi, which is that it can never fail to surprise you. You're walking down a road and suddenly you see this beautiful monument right beside you. It's in this busy street, or you are, suddenly a turn in the road will lead you to a Tibetan colony which you never expected. So these are, there is an element of surprise in Delhi, which came across as extremely, it was alluring for the, young adult in me, and something that it was like as if I was discovering something new every day. And Ashok sir is saying that he would like to read my writing on Kolkata as well, and I'm sure I will. That would be a very different perspective. I love Calcutta just as much, but Delhi, has a special place in my heart by virtue of just how much it has been able to surprise me and how well it embraces almost everyone who comes here. You can come with lofty ambitions and find them, turning out to be true in a city like Delhi.
Definitely, and you mentioned Tibetan colony. That brings me to that gave an idea to another question. That very recently people started calling areas like Majnu Ka Tira as empty, and I was new to Delhi, and a friend asked me to meet him at empty. I said, "What's empty?" Is it
MKT? MK, and that reminds me. In fact that happened with me as well, because I visited Majnu Ka Tila while I was a student in North Campus, and that time it was called Majnu Ka Tila, and very recently, about 2-3 years back, somebody told me, you want to go to MKT. I'm like, what on earth is that? And then he told me that it's Majnu Ka Tila. It's again very interesting how these abbreviations, they become the name themselves. If you look at CP for that matter and CR Park for that matter, it's almost a name in itself, and we hardly bother to dig into what was the original name of these places.
Definitely, and you were saying that the acceptance of names, and I think in a few years' time, in a decade or two, they'll become the name of the places, and
exactly
the common parlance will be MKT and CP and others. Okay, we have a question. Save historic Patna collectorate. They say, yeah. So he's saying, Adrija, you like which one more, Shahjahanabad or Lutyensbad?
I think I love both of them equally. I don't think there's any comparison here. They are both equally alluring in their own ways.
Yeah, for me it's Lutyens Bath because I studied at the Airfield College, which is in the Lutyens zone. I spent 3 years there in IIC and having great American dinner at American Diner, which I think is lovely. So that was a conversation with Adrija this evening, a wonderful conversation on a beautiful book, Delhi in Thy Name, The Many Legends That Make a City. And as Shahid Amin says, a brilliant portrayal of a historic Shahar. And I use the term subaltern because you had teachers like Shahid Amin and Amar Farooqi who has revolutionized history from that perspective, and that's why I use that word subaltern in the question.
I'm sure Dr. Shahid Amin and Amar Farooqi would be very happy to hear you use the word subaltern.
Definitely, and the conversation will be available on our YouTube channel and on our Instagram feed. So for those who enjoyed the conversation, can follow Karwaan and Rupa Publications, and they can follow us on various platforms. Adrija and I am also available on Instagram and other various young platforms that you can meet, and you can we can take this conversation forward on Delhi. And this day particular, I was not aware earlier when we decided on this date that this day also marks the birth anniversary of Mirza Ghalib, and we had a conversation on his city, Delhi, this evening, and it's a special tribute, and I dedicate this conversation to Mirza Ghalib, who needs no contributions and tributes, but here it is, and we have a special post up on Mirza Ghalib, so those who wish to read, they can read it, share it. Thank you so much, Adrija, for being who you are and so sweet and kind and accepting our invitation. And it was truly an honor being in conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Eshan. It was lovely being here, and thanks a lot for inviting me. And I had a really lovely time speaking to you.
Thank you so much, and I look forward to the second edition of the book with more localities and more insights.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, everyone. And we'll meet again on Instagram and on YouTube. Do check out our other sessions that are there on YouTube. We would love to get your feedbacks. And if you have other questions for Adrija, you can always send us on our email, that is karwaanheritage@gmail.com, or you can send us a back channel or what you call the DM on Instagram on our Karwaan page, and also on Rupa's page if you have other questions. Thank you so much. We'll meet again. Have a great evening. Stay safe. Omicron is on the rise, so it's better that you mask up and be safe. Thank you so much, and I look forward to meeting you, Adrija, in Delhi whenever I am. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. We'll end the live now. Bye.